Joshua, be strong and courageous.
What if I told you that not every pastor standing in the pulpit was truly serving God? Behind the polished sermons, the flashy suits, and the promises of salvation, some of the most respected black pastors were hiding dark secrets that would shock their congregations. While thousands trusted them with their faith, money, and souls, these so-called men of God were living double lives filled with greed, scandal, and corruption. From shocking crimes to unbelievable betrayals, the truth behind their actions is far from holy. Get ready, because these are the 10 most evil black pastors whose sins were too big to stay buried. 10. Pastor Tony Smith.
Preach once. You don't tell me what to preach. They that are led by the Spirit, they are the sons of God.
When it comes to pastors who thrive on controversy, Tony Smith has made it his calling card. Known for leading his Atlanta-based ministry, Smith built his reputation not on compassion or uplifting messages, but on sermons filled with hate, division, and open hostility. He stood in the pulpit and turned it into a stage for attacks, calling women Jezebels, mocking other denominations, and unleashing cruel rants against the LGBTQ+ community. His words weren't just opinions, they carried venom, creating an atmosphere that pushed people away rather than bringing them closer to faith. Videos of Smith's tirades spread online, shocking viewers and sparking outrage. What made it worse was his refusal to back down. While other leaders at least tried to soften their approach when called out, Smith wore the backlash like a badge of honor, claiming he was just preaching the truth. But the truth he delivered was drenched in anger and bitterness, fueling division instead of unity. For many, his sermons became the very definition of spiritual abuse, using the authority of Scripture not to guide or heal, but to wound and tear down. Instead of a shepherd protecting his flock, Smith became a wolf behind the pulpit, taking joy in the harm his words caused. This is why his name stands among the most evil black pastors, not because of hidden scandals or stolen money, but because of the hate he normalized under the banner of faith. 9. Pastor Jamal Bryant.
Joshua, be strong and courageous.
Jamal Bryant once carried the image of a rising star in the black church. Charismatic, stylish, and always in the spotlight. He had the kind of energy that drew crowds and kept them hanging on every word. But behind that charm was a trail of broken promises, affairs, and scandals that turned him into one of the most hypocritical figures to ever step into the pulpit. His marriage to reality star Gizelle Bryant collapsed under the weight of infidelity. Instead of being a one-time mistake, Bryant admitted to cheating multiple times, leaving his wife humiliated and his congregation questioning his character. Things only grew darker when a paternity lawsuit revealed he had fathered a child outside of marriage. For someone who preached about faithfulness, responsibility, and morality, his double life exposed a dangerous pattern of deceit. What made it worse was Bryant's ability to continue climbing higher even after his sins were exposed. He later became pastor of New Birth Missionary Baptist Church, stepping into the very role left behind by another disgraced leader, Bishop Eddie Long. To many, it looked like history repeating itself, another man using the pulpit to elevate himself while ignoring the very values he claimed to stand for. 8. Pastor David E. Wilson.
Of great and successful ministries.
For years, Pastor David E. Wilson carried the image of a devoted family man and respected spiritual leader. His sermons preached morality, fidelity, and righteous living, and his congregation looked to him as an example of how a Christian man should walk in faith. But in 2019, all of that came crashing down when a scandal exploded across the internet, one that forever tainted his name and reputation. A sexually explicit video surfaced online that allegedly showed Wilson in a compromising act. The clip spread like wildfire, passed around social media and text messages at lightning speed. Within hours, his name became a trending topic, and church members were suddenly confronted with the unthinkable. Their pastor, who once condemned immorality from the pulpit, was now being ridiculed worldwide for living the very sins he preached against. The scandal cut deeper than embarrassment. Wilson chose silence, refusing to confirm or deny the video's authenticity. But his silence only fueled speculation. Members of his congregation were left confused, ashamed, and betrayed, while outsiders turned the entire ordeal into a spectacle of memes and cruel jokes. What makes Wilson's downfall so damning isn't just the act itself, but the hypocrisy. He spent years condemning sin and upholding strict moral codes, only to be exposed as a man who could not live up to his own teachings. 7. Pastor Creflo Dollar.
Choice. The people you choose to marry are not perfect.
Creflo Dollar built his empire on a simple message: God wants you to be rich. Through the prosperity gospel, he convinced thousands of followers that giving more money to the church would open the door to blessings, success, and financial breakthroughs. With charm and confidence, he turned faith into a business, and his ministry grew into one of the most profitable in America. But behind the promise of prosperity was a man living a life of unchecked luxury, funded by the very people who trusted him. The most infamous moment came in 2015 when Dollar asked his congregation to raise $60 million for a private jet. Not just any jet, but a Gulfstream G650, one of the most expensive planes in the world. His reasoning? Commercial flights were too restrictive, and he needed the aircraft to spread the gospel globally. While his followers struggled to pay bills, he was shamelessly asking them to finance his lavish lifestyle. The backlash was immediate and brutal. Critics slammed him for exploiting his congregation, and news outlets across the nation turned him into a symbol of greed in the church. Even after the campaign was pulled, reports surfaced that he quietly obtained private jets anyway, proving that humility was never part of his ministry. 6. Pastor Lamor Whitehead. If there was ever a pastor who blurred the line between preacher and hustler, it was Lamor Whitehead. Known as the Bling Bishop of Brooklyn, Whitehead strutted into the pulpit dressed in designer suits, dripping with gold chains, diamond watches, and custom shoes that looked more suited for a rapper than a man of God. His flashy lifestyle raised eyebrows, but it wasn't until scandal struck that the world saw just how dangerous his greed had become. In 2022, during a live-streamed Sunday service, masked gunmen stormed his church and robbed him and his wife of over $1 million in jewelry. Instead of sympathy, the world responded with laughter and ridicule. People asked the obvious: what kind of pastor wears that much jewelry in the pulpit? But the robbery was only the beginning. By 2024, Whitehead's empire came crashing down when he was convicted of fraud. He had scammed one of his own followers out of $90,000, promising to help her buy a home, but using the money instead to buy luxury items for himself. The court sentenced him to 9 years in prison, transforming his Bishop of the Hood image into that of a common criminal. 5. Reverend Clarence LaVaughn Franklin. Reverend Clarence LaVaughn Franklin was more than just a preacher. He was a legend in the black church and the father of soul icon Aretha Franklin. Known as the man with the $1 million voice, he drew massive crowds to his Detroit church, recorded sermons that sold nationwide, and even marched alongside civil rights leaders like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. On the surface, he was a pillar of faith and justice, but behind closed doors, Franklin's life was filled with darkness that forever stained his legacy. Whispers surrounded him for years about constant affairs with women from his congregation. Unlike other scandals, kept quiet, Franklin's behavior was an open secret. Some even claimed he abused his power to take advantage of vulnerable women. The most disturbing rumor was that he fathered a child with a 12-year-old girl from his church, a story that, though never proven in court, haunted his reputation for decades. His mansion in Detroit was also notorious for wild parties, filled with drinking, drugs, and behavior that had no place in a pastor's home. Even his daughter Aretha was rumored to have witnessed traumatic events there as a child. Franklin also clashed with the law over tax issues and was once arrested on drug charges, painting an image of a man whose private life contradicted everything he preached. In 1979, Franklin was shot in what looked like a robbery, leaving him in a coma until his death 5 years later. For many, his legacy is a disturbing reminder of how even the most powerful voices in the church can be corrupted by lust, greed, and recklessness. 4. Reverend Henry Lyons. Reverend Henry Lyons once stood as one of the most respected men in the black church. As president of the National Baptist Convention USA, the largest black denomination in the country with over 10 million members, he held extraordinary influence. To the public, he seemed dedicated, trustworthy, and committed to serving God's people. But behind that image was a scheme so corrupt that it shook the foundation of the very church he led. In 1998, Lyons was exposed for using his position to embezzle millions of dollars from the denomination. Federal prosecutors revealed he had created fake companies, diverted church funds, and lived a lavish lifestyle far beyond his salary. The money went into luxury vacations, expensive jewelry, and even supporting secret relationships with multiple women. One mistress reportedly had full access to church credit cards, spending freely while Lyons preached about sacrifice and faith. His betrayal cut deeper because of the trust he had been given. Millions of believers looked to him as a spiritual guide, only to discover he was stealing from the very offerings they gave in good faith. Lyons denied wrongdoing at first, even claiming racial persecution, but the evidence was overwhelming. Bank records, witness testimony, and mountains of financial proof showed he had orchestrated one of the most shameful frauds in modern church history. In 1999, Lyons was sentenced to 5.5 years in prison. His story stands as a chilling example of how greed can poison a pastor's soul, making him one of the most evil black pastors to ever stand behind a pulpit. 3. Bishop Daniel Obinim. In Ghana, Bishop Daniel Obinim became infamous not for his preaching, but for the disturbing way he abused his authority. As the leader of International God's Way Church, Obinim gained a reputation for bizarre stunts in the pulpit, claiming to perform miracles, bragging about his supernatural powers, and even comparing himself to angels. But his most shocking scandal played out on live television, forever stamping his name among the most evil pastors. During a service in 2016, Obinim paraded 2 teenagers in front of his entire congregation. Accusing them of having premarital sex, he beat them with his belt in front of the cheering crowd. The disturbing act was broadcast nationwide, sparking outrage across Ghana and beyond. Instead of compassion, he turned his pulpit into a stage for humiliation and violence, scarring those young lives while his followers clapped. This wasn't an isolated moment. Obinim has been repeatedly accused of extortion, fraud, and exploiting his followers' faith for personal gain. His theatrics, from bizarre miracle healings to dramatic public outbursts, blurred the line between religion and abuse of power. Yet, despite arrests and government crackdowns, his loyal supporters have often defended him, blinded by devotion to Reverend James Cleveland, known as the King of Gospel. Reverend James Cleveland revolutionized church music and created the Gospel Music Workshop of America, shaping generations of singers and musicians. To the world, he was a towering figure of faith and creativity. But behind the music and acclaim was a deeply troubling story that emerged after his death, revealing a darkness few could have imagined. When Cleveland passed away in 1991, his reputation quickly crumbled under disturbing allegations. Christopher Harris, a foster son he had taken in, accused him of years of sexual abuse. Harris also claimed Cleveland knowingly infected him with HIV, a charge that shocked the gospel community to its core. The accusations painted a horrifying picture of a man who used his authority not to uplift, but to exploit and destroy. Though the case never went to trial, it was settled quietly out of court. The damage was permanent. Cleveland's name, once synonymous with gospel excellence, became entangled with whispers of betrayal, manipulation, and unimaginable harm. Some defended him fiercely, while others could no longer ignore the evidence and rumors that had swirled around his private life for years. The tragedy of James Cleveland lies in the contrast between his public image and his private actions. He wasn't just a musician, he was a pastor trusted to guide souls toward God. Instead, he allegedly shattered lives in secret, making him one of the most evil black pastors whose sins forever overshadowed his songs of praise. 1. Bishop Eddie Long. At the height of his power, Bishop Eddie Long led one of the largest churches in America. From humble beginnings, he transformed New Birth Missionary Baptist Church in Georgia into a megachurch with over 25,000 members. His empire included schools, businesses, and even a television studio. Dressed in sharp suits and driving luxury cars, Long was the very picture of prosperity, preaching a man who claimed God's blessing as proof of his success. But behind the image was a nightmare of exploitation that would bring his kingdom crashing down. In 2010, 4 young men accused Long of grooming and coercing them into sexual relationships. They revealed how he showered them with gifts, trips, and money, slowly manipulating their trust before crossing lines that no pastor should ever approach. The lawsuits exposed a chilling pattern of predatory behavior, leaving his congregation in shock. Members who once adored him now saw him as a man who had built an empire on lies. Long denied everything publicly, claiming Satan was trying to destroy his ministry. Yet, in 2011, he quietly settled the lawsuits for millions of dollars, a move that spoke louder than his words. His once thriving megachurch lost thousands of members, and his legacy became forever stained by scandal. Bishop Eddie Long represents the darkest face of spiritual corruption, a leader who used faith as a weapon to exploit the vulnerable. His fall wasn't just personal, it was a devastating blow to the entire black church community. And it is why he stands as the #1 most evil black pastor. From stolen millions to shattered lives, these pastors prove that evil doesn't always come dressed in darkness. Sometimes it wears a suit, stands in a pulpit, and preaches about God while living in sin. So now the question is this: how many more pastors are out there hiding behind the cross while committing acts just as evil? If this countdown opened your eyes, don't let the truth stay buried. Hit that like button, share this video with others, and subscribe so you never miss the hidden stories we uncover.